everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Now, if you hear purring in this, the cat has decided to join me on my bed to film this. He's exceptionally needy in his old age recently, and depending on what thumbnail I end up picking, you might notice me trying to push his head down so that I could do the thumbnail for this video. Because he really has never learnt the rule of personal space, but more so in his latter years, as he's quite an old cat now, he really doesn't understand. So he's already tried headbutting the iPad, walking through when I've tried to do a thumbnail. He does his own thing. It's a cat's world, you know? So I've just relented, as you can see. He's just doing his own thing, aren't you? So I can't really control what Archie does at any time, but he's being a good boy, so I'm just gonna let him chill. So today's video is going to be a library book haul, so I'm really feeling myself today. So I managed to get a swim in early this morning. I tidied the house a tiny bit. I really should have properly tidied the house, but since my brother's returned from travelling around Europe, he has not made a concerted effort to kind of keep things clean, and I have lost the will to live on that front. So maybe this weekend I will give it a spruce, but I gave it a spruce last weekend. I'm not going into it, okay? I just cleaned the necessary things like Archie's bowls and stuff, and tidied up a little bit of the washing up. And then I thought, no, I don't want to be here where it's stressing me out. And that swim really relaxed me, and I sat in the little jacuzzi for a bit because I belong to Total Fitness, so they have the kind of sauna in the jacuzzi, and I love that. And at the moment I've been very much seeing swimming as self-care, an exercise of self-care, and then every time I swim I'm like, oh, you can go sit in the jacuzzi with the jets for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes after this. So that's been really motivating me to go. And also I love doing exercise kind of first thing in the morning, then it's done and I've got the rest of my day. I kind of find evening really difficult to be motivated to go. Obviously in winter I'm going to make an effort to do that because there's nothing else to do. It's dark, it's depressing, and I'm going to keep my regime up in winter. That's a fact, because technically I actually started the gym last January, so I can do it. Anyway, waffle over. So I did that and was feeling really good, and then came back and it was a bit of a mess, and I thought, no, I don't want to be a part of this. So I thought, where is my happy place? And then I thought, you know where your happy place is? It's the library or a bookshop. So I've recently just finished a book, and I kind of have been going through my numerous piles in my room of books that I have, and then I was going through my bookshelf, and a lot of the books I've previously hauled or bought. Sorry about the shaking. I told you the cat does attack the iPad. He likes putting his teeth around the edge, so sorry. Were classics or more difficult books, or books that are really heavy, like The Luminaries I've still got to read, some Sarah Waters, really thick books. Goldfinch in the past, but obviously I finally got around to that. And I've kind of been pulling books out and going, no, I'm not really feeling you. And then the book that I'm just finishing now, which is Tangerine, was really fast paced, and I'm kind of on target for my Goodreads predicted kind of yearly target, which is around 60, which I managed to do quite comfortably, I believe, last year. Might be making that up, but I feel like I did between 60 and 65. Maybe I just got up to 60. It must have been around 60 because that's why I put it as a mark, because I kind of said to myself, well, you've done it. So I'm kind of around 41 at the moment, maybe 42, but one of them, Goodreads, I reread Little Women, and it's just kind of put it down as I've read it twice this year when I haven't, but it's just because I read it twice on Goodreads, and one was a DNA, so we're on target. I've still got 4 months to go, around 4 months. Is it 4 months? Well, September, October, November, December. Yeah, around 4 months. So I kind of wanted to pick some fast-paced reads and kind of thriller-esque things to kind of get me reading faster. And then I thought, I don't have anything that I want at the moment, so why don't I utilise the library? It's a really nice, dry, mild day, and go take yourself to the library and have a bit of you time. So I did. And I was looking through, and every single aisle a book was popping out at me, and I was like, oh my god. So I originally went with the incentive of, oh, I could maybe get 3 to 4 books. Then I kept seeing a lot, and I kind of kept putting them in my arms, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just narrow this down later. Then I desperately needed a wee, and I decided to say, do you know what? Screw it, you've brought your book bag, you can carry all of these beasts, let's just take them and see how many of these you can get out. So I managed to be able to get all of them out. and that led to 8 books being taken out, which is the most I've probably ever taken out from the library, because I know all about fines and the fears, so I don't really take out that much, but I really needed a wee, so I kind of was just like, I'm just going to commit to it. And cleverly, or not so cleverly, a lot of them are hardbacks as well. But without further ado, because I've now done officially 5 minutes of waffle, let's just get straight on in. So the first one I want to show you, I literally was in the library for less than 30 seconds before I found it, and I literally grabbed it off the shelf like this, kind of like looked around like this and thought, oh my god, this is like a fairly new read, one that I really want to read. I better put it in my arms before anybody else tries to get it. And that is Ordinary People by Diane Evans. So this, I am pretty sure, was on the Bailey's shortlist. I think it was, yes, because I remember listening to a Guardian's book podcast, and it was American Marriage that won Bailey's this year, but this was also on the list. And this is kind of similar, I believe, to An American Marriage, because it is about a marriage. But it's in the UK, but I believe it is about a kind of black marriage and the identity and the multiculturalism in the UK, whereas An American Marriage is kind of the US and about false incarceration and how the black community suffer from that and the repercussions of that on a marriage. Now, An American Marriage I absolutely loved. A lot of people really rave about this one. They say it's a lot harder to digest in some ways. I've heard a lot of people say this is very sad, but I really, really wanted to get to it. I'm really, really excited about it. I don't know that much apart from that, and I kind of want to go into it a little bit blind. But I get the sense, I've read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and these two book titles are incredibly similar, and I think a lot of people get them really confused, but I feel like it's going to be better than Normal People, and I quite enjoyed Normal People, but I think a lot of people gave that a lot of hype, and I wasn't as in love with it. I liked it a lot more than Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, but I was kind of like, liked it, but didn't love it, because I think the representation of kind of mental health and their relationships were a little bit problematic for me personally, and I believe that this is kind of similar, a bit Marmitey maybe. So I kind of just for intrigue want to read it as well and compare it to Normal People and to An American Marriage in some ways and see where it stands, but a lot of people wanted this to win, so we shall see. And then the next book I picked up was The Corset by Laura Purcell. Now, I read, was it last year or the beginning of this year? I can't actually remember now. I read The Silent Companions and loved it. I thought it was really fast paced. I kind of like a gothic thriller-esque, unnerving, creaks in the night, things aren't quite right kind of thing. And this was kind of on the back of The Silent Companions. It was saying, you know, in the new year this book was coming out, and I missed kind of when it was released. But I remember, but in the back of my mind, there's loads of books that have kind of been on the radar that I said, oh, I'll get to you when you next crop up in my life. And so when I came to the library and saw it, and thankfully I saw it was a paperback because there was a hardcover next to it, and thank God I said, no, I'll go with the paperback so it'll be easier to transport, because basically aside from one next book, everything else is a hardback. But again, I don't know that much about this one. Ruth and Dorothea make a friendship. Ruth's a teenage seamstress, and when she goes to visit her in prison to do charitable work, they reveal past disturbing things Ruth's done, a new layer of revelation. It just sounds juicy, really up for that. Silent Companions was beautifully juicy, and I love that kind of drawn out literary fiction, but a thriller. You still wanted to know what's happening and kind of what's going on, so I really like that. So I really think I like this. And then the next one I picked up was Kazu Ishiguro's The Berry Giant. Sorry if I butchered his name. I feel like everybody manages to pronounce people's names beautifully. I butcher them, and I don't know whether it's my accent, the illiterate kind of side of the world I come from in the northwest. I don't know what it is, but I just can't, and I struggle really hard. I'll look at a word and the pronunciation every single time will just be off a little. So I apologise. It's just me. I'm just not I'm just not good at that, but it doesn't mean I'm not well read, okay? And I'm kind of smart-ish, so I apologise that I butchered that. But this is a well-known classic from Kazu Ishiguro. Kazu Ishiguro? And I have read Never Let Me Go, and I really enjoyed that. I read it at school, and I didn't enjoy it as much at school because it was one of those set texts, and I was the opinionated little literary bud of a character who wanted to question everything. And then I reread it more in my adulthood and really reappreciated it, and I really enjoyed the film with Keira Knightley. But this one, a lot of people say, is his best. A lot of kind of controversy, really, because a lot of people say this is his best, but then a lot of people prefer Never Let Me Go. It's kind of had more popularity than this one. But a lot of people who love him say that this is his best. And I believe, I forgot what booktuber I was watching recently, and she was kind of like, oh, I can't ever read it without it making me cry. I think it was a new booktuber a new booktuber for me I was watching. And she was recommending a second book that kind of reminded her of this one. And I know that the girls over at What Page You on podcast have recently also mentioned this book. And it's kind of one that I feel like I should have in my own made-up literary canon world. This is something that I should get to. I have quite a few authors, like Sarah Waters and Kazu Ishiguro, and Zadie Smith, kind of characters like that, and Ali Smith, that I want to get through their canon, because they're my canon of what I think really is good modern literature. And when I've loved one of their books, I kind of want to... It's like Pokemon, you've got to catch them all, you know, you've got to read them all. So it was on my radar, and I saw it, and I was like, now's your time. So there's that one. And then the next one is the biggest, chunkiest hardback ever, which is 3 Things About Elsie. Now, one thing about the libraries, just to kind of link into that title loosely. Why on earth do libraries seem to prefer hardcovers? Because there's just hardcovers everywhere at my library. And I was thinking, for a library to buy this in its paperback, would it not be cheaper? Budgeting and things, but they seem to love a hardback, because this must have been, yeah, it says in the UK this was about £15 as a hardback, so I don't know how that works, but they're a fan of the hardbacks. And then when I went into Waterstones after the library, because I like to browse and kind of see all the other books that are on my radar and kind of touch them and be like, eventually you'll be next, I noticed all of these books in like really condensed and like pretty and small paperbacks. And it was just something I was thinking about, thinking, well, that's quite strange. Anyway, 3 Things About Elsie by Joanna Cannon. I briefly read the synopsis because I didn't really remember the story. I've read The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon previously, and I really enjoyed that. And it kind of sounds like a similar fluffy-esque story. So it had quite hard things, kind of hard topics, if I remember, in The Trouble with Goats and Sheep. It was based in the British heatwave in the 70s. I've just read Instructions for a Heatwave, so I should know what year that heatwave was in the UK, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, this one's about Florence, who lives in a little old people's home, and she has a fall, and we're kind of learning about, she meets somebody that she thought was dead, I believe, and then it's kind of like, oh, he looks like somebody I used to know, and then it's kind of reminiscing from there, and we learn a lot about her past. So I don't know how that links into Elsie. Maybe Elsie's a shorter name for Florence. I don't know. Anyway, I remember enjoying The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, and it was a really easy read to get through, so I feel like this will be the same. So I'm going to give it a go and see how that turns out. And then the next book I picked up was kind of a little bit on a whim, because I saw its spine, pulled it out, and then realised upon pulling it out that it was a book that maybe last year was on my radar and I'd kind of forgotten all about. And that is The Woman Next Door by Yewande Omotoso. You know me. I have no idea. Anyway, I think this was on maybe the long list or short list from the Bailey's Prize last year, if I remember correctly, because when I read the blurb it kind of reminded me. So it says, Hortenzina James and Marion Agostino are neighbours. One is black, one white. Both are successful women with impressive careers. Both have recently been widowed and both are sworn enemies, sharing hedge and hostility which they prune with a zeal that belies the fact that they are both over 80. But one day an unforeseen event forces the women together, and gradually the bickering and sniping softens into lively debate, and from there into memories shared. But could these sparks of connection ever transform into friendship, or is it too late to expect these two to change? So I remember a lot of people kind of gave this one mixed reviews. I remember Simon from Savage Reads read this one. And I thought, if nothing else, it might be a fast-paced, quick read to kind of connect these two women together and to hear about their lives. And it seemed like quite a thin hardback, so I feel like it would be quite easy to get through. But I remember that a lot of people said it just didn't give them what they really wanted from it. So I just saw it and I was like, I might as well, and then I can just tick it off in my mind for curiosity's sake. So there's that one. And then the next one, I also saw this, grabbed it like I did when I grabbed Ordinary People, and was like, oh my god, I really wanted to read this book pretty soon anyway, and I am so impressed that I can read it. It's current, it's relevant. And then I felt really mean. I was like, oh my god, this will be really popular for a load of people. But when I went through the other aisles, I saw it again, so they must have had multiple copies of it, so I kind of feel a bit more relieved that I snatched it. And that is Frankenstein by Jeanette Winterson. Now, I'm pretty sure this is on the Man Booker long list that was recently released. I know The Testaments by Margaret Atwood is, but I'm pretty sure this one is. I'm pretty sure I haven't made that up. Because it's been an interesting long list, because a lot of people, apart from, I think, the book My Sister the Serial Killer, maybe that, and maybe another one, or maybe it's only that one as a debut novelist, which is quite unexpected. Usually, I remember listening to Guardian's book podcast and said it's quite common that a lot of debut novelists come out on the list, whereas a lot of them are kind of well-established authors. For example, Jeanette Winterson, Margaret Atwood, and Salman Rushdie. So, anywho, that was just a side note. I really wanted to read this because I remember reading Frankenstein and finding the concept really interesting. It is a very unexpected classic. I think a lot of people have a massive misconception of what Frankenstein as a story is. It's very slow. There's no monster horror in it at all. It's very much a classic. It's musing on the encroachment of science, and it's very understated. It's very drawn out. So a lot of people who kind of like the horror movie style of Frankenstein will hate Frankenstein, the actual original classic, because it really isn't what it's said to be. First of all, Frankenstein is the man who creates the monster. The poor monster is a troubled being who only wants to be loved and who nobody really wants to love because he's grotesque to look at, and it turns him so embittered, and it's such a destructive novel in an understated way. When I read it, my heart bled for the monster. I just felt like Frankenstein was so cruel to him. That's not really how it's portrayed in modern kind of contemporary life. I'm trying to think of the word, but it's not coming. I'm not feeling that smart today. Anyway, so when I remembered that this was going to be a retelling, and a really interesting retelling, because Jeanette Winterson plays with sex and gender in a really interesting way, and I know that there's something to do with transgender in this, so I remember thinking I really wanted to get to it, because in university, I read by first Jeanette Winterson, which was, I don't think it was Sexting the Cherry, it was one of her earlier novels. I forgot what it was about, kind of a lesbian relationship, and I remember reading it, and it was quite naive. I was 18, it was one of my first modules in English, and the kind of unencumbered way she talked about a sexual relationship between two women. And then I remember reading Sarah Waters, and I was like, oh, there's a whole world of LGBT literature that I'm just living for, you know? And I think it's completely accessible and interesting and fascinating for people who aren't necessarily LGBTQ, because I always feel like university, I felt so insecure about the idea that I didn't belong to these groups of people that were allowed to talk about these things. For example, your heritage, your sexuality, your gender, and then reading Zadie Smith and Sarah Waters and Jeanette Winterson. There's no ownership of that experience, and I really enjoy reading LGBTQ. I really enjoy reading from minority groups. I like diversity in my reading, and I kind of got to a place now where I'm comfortable enough to say that it might not be the diversity that I'm living, but I'm allowed to be part of that experience. And also I have a nice affiliation for Jeanette Winterson because she was born in the north west-ish. She went to Oxford and, you know, she had a very difficult upbringing, but she has a little bit of that in her, a little bit of that northern soul that I like. She's amazing. Anyway, the book is about, it says, in Brexit Britain, a young transgender doctor called Rye is falling in love against their better judgment with Victor Stein. Meanwhile, Ron Law, just divorced and living with Mum again, is set to make his fortune launching a new generation of sex dolls for lonely men everywhere. Across the Atlantic in Phoenix, Arizona, Cryonorix facility houses dozens of bodies of men and women who are medically and legally dead but waiting to return to life. But the scene is set in 1816 when 19-year-old Mary Shelley writes a story about creating a non-biological life form. Beware, for I'm fearless and therefore powerful. What will happen when Homo sapiens are no longer the smartest beings on the planet? Jeanette Winterson shows us how much closer we are to that future than we realise. Funny and furious, bold and clear-sighted, Frankenstein is a love story about life itself. So to me that sounds fascinating and really playful. I know that Ian McEwan has done a playful book called, is it Men Like These or Bodies Like These? Oh, I've forgotten. I'm going to sound like a tit now because someone's going to comment down below and be like, it's really obvious it's this. But I briefly saw it today in the bookshop and I couldn't really remember its name now. I've come back, but it had a kind of plastic like Ken doll on the front. And I remember listening to a Penguin podcast about it recently, and it was to do with artificial intelligence and having a robot, and I found that story fascinating. But I think modern novelists are really playing around with how the massive expansion of technology and artificial intelligence and these things like Google Home and Amazon Echoes and all this kind of encroachment of technology into our everyday life and where it's going to lead. And this sounds really playful. I'm living for this. It's very modern, very relevant, very fresh, very now, and I can't wait to get to it. And then the next one is Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. Oh, and she wrote A Visit from the Goon Squad. I've just seen it down here, and that is something that the two ladies on What Page Are You On podcast rave about, so I might get to that if I enjoy this. So I know that this was on a long list for a prize. I've tried to do some research really messily before this video and I can't figure out where I saw it, but I saw it. It happened. So this was published in 2017. I can't remember really what it was about. It says it's a first historical novel of Jennifer Egan's with an atmosphere of a noir thriller. It says Anna Kerrigan, nearly 12 years old, accompanies her father. Years later, her father disappears. What's going to happen? So that sounds kind of interesting. I think some people had issues with this book. I remember a few people reviewing it saying they didn't love it like they thought they were going to love it. But these are ones I've always wanted to get to. It does seem like it's going to be quite a big read, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And if the ladies from What Page Pod Are You On said A Visit from the Goon Squad is like one of their all-time favourite books, then this author must be worth my time. So I'm going to start here, and if I love it, I'll get to A Visit from the Goon Squad. So there you go. And then the last one is The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. I read the first page while I was in the library and it really interested me, so this was definitely on the Baileys list at some time. I don't know whether it was last year, year before, I don't know. It was relevant. I remember that Jasmine over at Jasmine's Reads read this and I don't know if she loved it. I think she respected it, but I'm not entirely sure how much she enjoyed it. So it says it's set in 2003. Amy Hall is at the start of her consecutive life sentences at Stanville's Women's Correctional Facility in California's Central Valley. Surviving in prison life and that. So I'm going to give it a go. It was really raved about for a while, so there was some hypage around this. There was some hypage around quite a few of these books, to be fair. But I don't know more than that, so I'm just going to call this quits because I'll read it, I'll let you know. And this video is probably rambly enough. So, thank you guys so much for sticking with yet another rambly video from Beth. I will kind of probably do a wrap-up all in one of these books and kind of do a library wrap-up for you. If I manage to be quite fast with them, I might end up having to insert pictures because I might panic, do these in stages and then take them back to the library before my arse gets a fine. But we'll see. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. I'm hoping to do some kind of book tag, something a lot less strenuous. I've read some really enjoyable books recently, like I've mentioned. Instructions for a Heatwave, An American Marriage, and some others, Ponty, Tangerine. I can't wait to do a wrap up of because I really enjoyed all of them pretty much, so that will be fun. But thank you guys so much for watching and I'll be back very soon. Bye now!